I mean, I have a little mantra, which is, plan everything and then leave the plan outside the room when you go in the door. Be open, because as you said, just the ability to remember that not everybody necessarily agrees with you. You may be convinced that you're absolutely right. Doesn't mean you're absolutely right. So there's a certain humility that we have to keep about us all the time. And to walk in and say, hey, if I'm right, it'll come out in the wash.
Have you ever walked into a meeting convinced you had the right idea, only to watch someone resist it, derail it, or quietly prevent it from moving forward? I have, and too often, my instinct was to respond with more evidence, a stronger business case, or a better argument. What I've learned is that leading change usually doesn't break down because we lack credibility or we lack expertise. It breaks down because we underestimate the human side of trust. My guest, Charlie Green, the co-author of The Trusted Advisor and the creator of the Trust Equation, has been a mentor of mine, and he has profoundly influenced how I think about leadership. In this conversation, Charlie helped me to listen for what isn't being said, to respond to resistance with curiosity instead of defensiveness, and prepare thoroughly without becoming attached to the outcome. If you're trying to make change happen without having all the positional authority or resources financially you need, I believe this conversation will help you become a more trusted and effective guide. Let's go. Well, I am so excited to welcome back to the show the Trusted Guide podcast, Charlie Green, who is a co-author of The Trusted Advisor, the original book, and also the reprint, the 20th anniversary edition as well, and the founder of Trusted Advisor Associates as well. Charlie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be back.
I am so, you are my mentor. and I just so excited to talk today about something near and dear to my heart, which is trust.
Yeah.
And in particular, trust in the eyes and the application of a leader. And we're going to be talking in the frame of business today, but it could be really anything.
Yeah.
And in particular, one of the brilliant inventions, if you will, that you and your colleagues created there that way back when, the trust equation, and how leaders can think about it, the mindset they should have, the way they should, maybe some of the myths around what people believe about what it takes to be trusted or trustworthy. And then in particular, there's an interesting story behind the four components. So we're going to dig into that a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure. Great.
Okay. So for those who may not be familiar, if you would just give a brief overview of the trust equation and how it's set up, why you set it up the way you did.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Let me put this. Really, it should be called the trustworthiness equation. It's not about trusting. It's about being trusted. So it's the elements of trustworthiness. It's not the only model out there. There's some interesting academic models, and we actually derived our version of it from something else that I thought was imperfect. All right. But that said, there are four components set up in the form of an equation, like A plus B plus C over D. And then the letters are C plus R plus I over S. And that stands for credibility plus reliability plus intimacy, all divided by self-orientation. And you're right, that was the most popular part of the book. I think in part because people say, oh, cool, there's an equation. I could simplify it. It's a little bit fake to put it exactly in those terms, but it's easy for people to grasp. And the words are pretty much, credibility is exactly what you think. Reliability is exactly what you think. Intimacy maybe needs a little bit more mention. It's kind of emotional safety. Do I feel like this person's going to rat me out or make fun of me or something, or can I be open and free with them? And self-orientation also needs a little description. That means who are you paying attention to? Who are you in it for? But especially who are you paying attention to? Yourself or me as the person you're talking to? And obviously to the extent that you're focused on yourself, even while you're pretending to talk to me, that's high self-orientation. That's why it's in the denominator. That reduces trustworthiness. And at the time, we kind of assumed ourselves, just looking at the equation, that the S factor in the denominator, because it's the only one on that side, was probably the strongest factor. And as it turns out, over the years, by a slight margin, intimacy is actually stronger if you equally weight all four of them. But the real lesson is there's a combination of two and another two. And the two, the I and the S together, are both what I would call emotional, non-rational kinds of. Those are significantly stronger than the other two, the reliability and credibility, which I would call the rational factors. So I think the real headline is there's actually more power in trust if you can nail those sort of emotional components than there is this stuff that we tend to spend a lot of time on. What are my credentials? How smart am I? Blah, blah, blah. Let me stop there.
Yeah. So that surprised you, obviously, because you were thinking it was going to be S and self-orientation down there in the bottom, and yet it was intimacy. So how do you make sense of that?
Well, two ways I would say. One is if you think about it instead of what's stronger, think about sequencing. The way you naturally go about a sales call, for example, or a first date, to make it personal. You start out with a bio. You start out with a resume. You start out with credentials, a website, something, and like if people are looking for inviting 10 vendors in, the first thing they do is look for your website and how many clients have you worked for in the past and what credentials and how many smart people, da-da-da-da. Look at the resume. Then you come in and have a meeting and you get to know people. And that's when the I and the S start to work. You get to see people, look them in the eye, see how they react to you, see if they listen to you, and it's as much feeling as anything. I mean, credentials are fairly cold, hard facts. So are track records and reliability dependable. But intimacy, low self-orientation, that's a vibe. That's what you pick up. And just because we use soft words to describe it doesn't mean they're not powerful. They really are. So that's one perspective, the sequencing. The other one is we did a regression analysis, which is complicated statistical stuff. And I always tell people, don't believe a regression analysis unless it makes common sense. Well, there is some common sense. You think about any culture in the world, there's a great deal of respect for elder people, and not always and not to every degree, but what goes along with age, wisdom and kind of able to read people. The most interesting thing to me may be every year Gallup polls, they do a survey, last 30 years or so, most and least trusted professions. And everybody can guess what's at the bottom. It's politicians, used car salesmen, and lawyers, right? Everybody gets that. And then I ask people, what do you think is at the top? And most people will guess, doctors, teachers, they're top 5. But you know what number 1 is? Nurses. And when I tell people that, they go, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Well, yeah, it does make sense. And I always give people a little vignette. If you're going into surgery and right before the anesthesiologist puts you under, the surgeon comes up to you and says, you're going to be up and walking in a week. And then the nurse comes up to you and whispers in your ear, honey, it's going to be a month. Who do you believe?
Right.
And if you think about the essence of the reason that nurses rank so high, it's all about the intimacy stuff. Their job is to be non-judgmental and to make you feel completely at ease. We are literally and figuratively naked in front of nurses, and their job is to make that okay. It's also, parenthetically, women tend to score more highly on this test that we developed for the trust equation. And again, most people say, that kind of makes sense. And all the difference is in the intimacy factor. It's not in the other 3. So there's a couple reasons why I think it makes good common sense.
Yeah. So let's dig into intimacy a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then I want to, if you could answer this in maybe in sequence. So lay out that definition a little bit more for us when we say intimacy, because it's Andrea Howe, our common friend, says it's a rich word that was used, and it's kind of an awkward word in the business
that's right.
vernacular. But you chose intimacy, so let's dig into that. And then, what are some of the mistakes that leaders make when they miss the intimacy part?
Yeah. It is a rich word, and it's probably the most common mistake. We miss opportunities. Think of a Venn diagram overlapping with concepts like vulnerability, transparency, safety. There is a lot of richness to it, and and we're not comfortable talking about stuff like that. And I mean, just means the overtones of sexuality, but even the personal safety, security. We're professional. We don't have to deal with stuff like that. Well, yes, you do. You're dealing with human beings. I don't care how professional they are. They're still people. And, a great example is if somebody mentions, something at the trailing end of a sentence, you'll maybe run into him before I do. Or, yeah, some people would think that. Or, if you don't pick up on that, if you let it go, you're missing an opportunity to create intimacy, because the right thing to say is, gee, I just, what do you mean by that? Would you mind exploring just a little bit? What do you mean when you say you'll see before I do? What do you mean when, those are little opportunities. Or one way to make sure you don't miss them is wait a half a second longer before answering some questions, and wait for the other person to fill in the space. People give out cues all the time. I know we do a video example. We show people a good version and a bad version, and the bad version is not that bad. But I ask people which one was better. Every single one in the room, all the time, all of them say that one was better, and they're right. Then you say, why? Well, they have a little harder time explaining it. But I point to the fact every one of you responded gut feeling that was better. And if you really examine it, it was better because he listened, because he elicited more reactions from people. So we all have this capability. We just, out of fear, I might say something stupid, I might be wrong. We censor ourselves, and we don't go there. We don't ask the follow-up question. So in a way, it's really about fear. Our own fears limits us from getting involved with people. Our own fears about sharing stuff from ourselves. A very good thing sometimes is, I got to tell you the stupid thing that I did once. If you rat yourself out, what does that do? That opens up for the other person to say, well, I had the same thing. So there's, another way to create intimacy. I'm rambling around here.
One of the things that you said, though, was interesting to me, because if there are people listening who think, well, I'm a science math person, I'm good with numbers, not so much with people. I feel really uncomfortable with people. But one thing you hinted at was that, like, it might be it's a skill that you can develop.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, if you are, like as you said, a science math nerdy type person, one of the most disarming things you can say is, look, I'm recently realizing I'm kind of a science math nerdy sort of person, so please forgive me if I fool up at this, but I get the sense that, boom, you just, say it out loud. People are far more forgiving of science math nerdy people because, as you just said yourself, we're not supposed to be good at it. So the worse you are at it, the easier it is in some ways to get better at it.
So if I could relate to one of my misses when it comes to intimacy, is I tend to be, maybe I'm okay at math and even less okay at science, but I tend to be in my head a lot. So I tend to be strategic, and I'm thinking 2 and 3 things ahead.
Right.
And I find when my mind is there, I miss the subtleties. I miss that trailing off. I can miss the trailing off at the end of a sentence, where if someone slips in, well, I'll be out that week because I've got this huge, I'm traveling around the world, or I've got this medical thing, and there could be something that, to your point, that they just kind of drop something that could have been important for me to just not just roll over.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that's why listening is, rather than listening, everybody says you do a better job at listening. True, but what do you do with that? I think it's actually more useful to say pay attention. Paying attention to the person without any judgment or attempt to say what are they saying or analyze it. Just be paying attention. Be there. Pays off enormous dividends. And another thought for people like you, and we all have this, we all tend to live in our heads and be, get lost in our thoughts. A very good habit for people like that, which is all of us to some extent, is to get in the habit of saying, let me just think out loud for a moment. Give yourself permission to articulate some of those thoughts in your head in a socially acceptable manner. And let me think out loud is a socially acceptable thing to say.
Yeah.
And then you can share it.
So you mentioned fear, and I want to double tap on that one a little bit, because I think one of the areas of focus, and part of the reason for this particular renaming of the podcast, it was Delighted Customers, now it's Trusted Guide, is because I believe I suffered so much in doing things the way I wish I had done them or done differently. And now I can look back in retrospect and say, well, this is an area, gosh, having been exposed to your great work and worked on a team with your folks at Trusted Advisors, I should have known better. Right. I knew this stuff, and there were so many times where I missed these opportunities. And I think
Yep.
part of the reason it does connect to fear, but part of it is I feel like someone's going to get in the way of us getting the work done
Yeah.
that we need to get done. And this person's throwing something out there that sounds like a threat to us getting our work done. So I may, gloss over, roll over, these kind of things. And what would be, let me just, let's say role play for a minute. I'll throw out the role play. What would be a better way of handling this than the way? So I'm just going to make this up on the spot here. So, hey, we discovered some information from our customers. And the customers are complaining about this particular point of friction. And the friction is when they go to our website, they can't find help, right? They can't find help, and they want to speak to a live person, and they can't find that. So that's the feedback that we're getting from our customers. And then so now let's say you were saying that, and I'm in the room and I'm head of one of the departments, and I say, Mark, I'll say, Charlie, do you have any idea how many people and how much effort it would take us to be able to install a help button and actually have someone behind that, curtain to serve them?
Yeah, exactly. And that conversation goes downhill fast. Yeah.
What's a better way to respond to someone who throws out, and maybe this is assuming the best is one of the answers, but maybe that person's actually not your enemy.
Right. A good assumption to make. Don't assume everybody's your enemy. I mean, I'll give you a glib, quick answer. The right answer is 3 words: tell me more. Followed up by help me under, maybe a little bit, a couple times, help me understand, tell me more. And then say, listen, this is a little off topic for what we're doing here. Do you think this is worthwhile our expanding our agenda and our time to focus on this issue you just raised? Or do you think we should put a pin in it and deal with it later? What do you think? Because we've got limited time and resources. So you invite them in to own the problem along with you. That's my gut reaction to it.
So I love that because of 2 things. One is the natural tendency is I would be triggered and I would want to come back and say, no, that's not true. It doesn't have to cost that much. ABC company did it for pennies on the dollar or whatever.
Yep, down the drain.
Right. And then, have I created an ally, or really are we getting further apart? What you suggested was tell me more, help me understand. Those are, to me, assuming there's no tone there,
right,
that they're invitations and respecting the person's point, and the fact that you suggested that you would be willing to expand, not try and contract the amount of time we can talk about that, is also very diffusing.
Yeah, I think what's going on there in that kind of dialogue, the word collaboration comes to mind. We're both in this together. This is not you bringing me a problem that I have to fix. This is our problem. And we together have to decide how much resources to allocate to dealing with this issue. So we're equal partners. So that's one kind of subtext of that dialogue. And as you pointed out, the beginning subtext is I respect you. You wouldn't have raised this if it wasn't meaningful, right? So tell me a little more. If you got nothing more, then you'll back off. But it's not confrontational.
So I want to, I feel like I'm going backwards, but I want to reverse engineer the conversation that people should have. And so walking into the room, knowing that you have got this initiative you want to get rolling. Right. You already thought through all the steps. You've thought through how it will end up and how it will help the organization or the customers or whatever. And in your mind, it's the absolute right thing we need to do. So you also may be aware that not everybody thinks the same way you do. What would be an appropriate mindset for you to have going into that room?
Good question. I have a little mantra, which is, plan everything and then leave the plan outside the room when you go in the door. Be open, because, as you said, just the ability to remember that not everybody necessarily agrees with you. You may be convinced that you're absolutely right. Doesn't mean you're absolutely right. So there's a certain humility that we have to keep about us all the time, and to walk in and say, hey, if I'm right, it'll come out in the wash. I don't need to be defensive. I don't need to pitch it. I've thought this through. Let's talk. Let's see. So that's a couple pieces of mindset. Humility, obviously prepare. You should be prepared. You should have thought it through thoroughly. But be open and be prepared to, accept as valid any other point of view and deal with it as it comes.
I can't remember what part of your work I saw this phrase that you came up with, but I really like it, and it's consistent with what you just shared. Maybe you can tell me the reference. Detach from the outcome.
Right. Yeah, it's a great
Wow.
line. Yeah, I'm glad you pick up on that. Yeah, it's that one goes deep. It's sort of almost personal, psychological, philosophical stuff. Do the best you can do. Do the next right thing. Do all the stuff you should do, and then once you've done what you can do, detach from the outcome. Meaning, it's out of your hands. You're not in charge of everybody after that. You're not God to expand it. You're not in charge of anything. Do the best you can and put it on the table and leave it there. It's now out of your hands. You've done what you can,
So
as
that
opposed
is,
to continuing to try and pick at it and push it and argue for it.
yeah, that is a great segue to the area, because I know a lot of your work is around really people who look at sell as a four-letter word.
Yeah, exactly.
Lawyers, engineers, CPAs, et cetera, right?
Sure.
Has been, professional white collar people who, hate to sell. They're good at what they do, but they hate to sell. And
Right.
so you wrote Trust-Based Selling as another book. And what I'm talking about is it's a kind of sales. It's organizational sales. It's getting initiatives done when you don't have the authority or budget.
Right.
And
Right.
you have to use influence because you're not the actual person turning the levers.
Right.
You're not the one spinning the wheel. You're not the one turning the levers. So you have to get it done. And so you're in this room that's why I wanted to specifically put you in that room and say, well, wait, you got the one outlier. Maybe there's two outliers. And so I think one of the areas I want to go to is thinking this more organizationally. We talk about in the Trusted Guide material, we talk about understanding the set of players. It's, if you will, it's
Right.
a canvas of people, and trying to understand who they are, and going beyond just like what their titles are, what their roles are.
Right.
You need to kind of know who the people are that can influence your decision. But more importantly, like how do you influence them? And so I don't want to give answers, but I want to ask the question is, how do you think about this more as, are there any differences between thinking about persuading someone or influencing someone to buy your product or buy your law firm's offering than there is to convert a group of people that you need to make a decision to get some progress done?
Yeah, I
Is there,
think they're
is there
pretty
any
much the
difference?
same. No,
It's the
the
same.
differences I think are cosmetic. It really is the same issue. How do you move a group of people in the direction of a particular decision? I put it that way. That's both sales and leadership, et cetera. So I see the commonalities.
Yeah, so let's play off that a little bit. So we've got 5 key people. They all play
Yeah.
different roles. So you got IT, you've got regulatory compliance, you've got marketing, you've got product, and you've got let's just make it up. Your change management. You're the change management department. You get all these people. They have different interests.
Right.
They have different hats they wear for their role. Would it be safe to say that you need to understand first where each is coming from,
Right.
and that takes in a bit of investment? Perhaps it could be quick, or it could require a little bit of time to get to know that person a little bit, kind of
Yeah.
understand what their goals are,
Right.
and build a relationship. Would that be the right path?
Yeah, I think so. And let's explore that a little further. I think whether it's in that particular meeting or it's before or continuing, whatever,
Yeah.
you want to be asking things like, help me understand what this means for you and for your team. And if this goes through, how big an impact is it going to have? What kind of impact? Help me understand what it's going to look like if we go one way or another? How affected are you guys? And is it a plus or is it a minus, or what are we forgetting to ask? So once you let people, and the reason for asking all those questions is not just to make sure you map out the full territory, that's important enough, but also so that the people involved in the decision feel heard and understood and paid attention to. And the reason for all that, to go way high level, people respond in a reciprocating way to being respected, appreciated, understood, seen, right? How do they respond reciprocally? They return good for good and bad for bad. You pay attention to me, I'm going to pay attention to you. You say something nice to me, I'm going to say something nice to you. You reach your hand out in a handshake, automatic, I'm going to shake your hand. You diss me, disrespect me, and pay no attention to me, well, guess what? I'm paying attention to you either. So that's the fundamental dynamic always going on between people. And we use that dynamic to our benefit if we lead by asking people, where are you in this? How does this affect you? What's going on with you? What does this mean? What's it going to look like? So that's partly in a meeting, and as you said, partly outside the meeting. Depends.
Yeah, I want to share a personal fail that I had when I was at the bank.
Oh no, I have to share one too.
You can share when we get. I'll make it a longer story quick, but it was a big initiative to introduce a new index that we were going to use to measure how customers felt about us based on their feet, what they did with their feet, right? And so you get to look at hard data, not just survey feedback results, but
Right.
what products they bought, let's say. And one of the people in the group, who I missed, had significant reservations about it. And I didn't explore, I didn't engage that person. I heard smatterings of discontent,
Right.
but the real issue was that the metrics they were currently being evaluated were all controllable in their mind.
Mm.
And this metric, because it was an organization-wide metric that it went beyond just their area,
Right.
felt like their people could be penalized by it.
Right.
And that was not at all the intent of the metric. But because I missed that, and that person basically at the big meeting created a roadblock for me, we literally sent us sideways for 3 years.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I had to do a lot of repair and much more. It's like cleaning the leak, after you discover the flood in the
Yeah.
basement.
Right.
So what comments how does that fit into what we were just talking about?
Well, that triggers two thoughts in my mind. One of them is just reinforce what we've been saying.
Yeah.
Don't get the leak in the first place. Make sure you do make every person in that room has been asked, paid attention to, listened to, so that they've had a chance to get their concern. We don't have control over this. We could be at effect of what other people do. Oh, that's great. What should we do about it? Well, I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, but we should be attentive to it. Good. The fact that you let somebody air that and say it out loud in front of their peers is often good enough. So I think it goes to, you got to do your homework first. Do a leak assessment in the basement before all the time, ongoing. And the other thing that's interesting is you tell that story. I'm sure that's meaningful to you. It's probably not the first time you've told it. What do we all do when we screw up like that? And it's good to remember some stories, but it's also good once you learn something like that. Number one, learn from it. Don't do it again. And number two, let it go. There's what's the old saying? Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. That's why they call it
Today.
Today is the present.
Yeah.
Today is all you have. That's why they call it a present. And it's really true. I mean, if we live in the past, protecting ourselves from bad memories or in the future, it's no good. So that's kind of an ancillary.
Yeah. I think part of my own lesson, and you hit on it too, is like, don't assume that because people don't say anything,
Right.
or they say something that may sound somewhat neutral or oblique, that they're on board with you.
Right. Amen.
Yeah. What was your story?
Oh, I didn't actually have one there. I'm just kind of kidding. Talking about reciprocity. If you're going to share something, then I have to. I didn't actually have one right there. Maybe I'll think of one.
Right, right. I have to, those people who are listening who are saying, yeah, this is a bunch of BS, right? That's touchy-feely stuff.
Yeah,
Um, I know what really works. What executives in the C-suite care about is return on investment.
yeah.
They care about the numbers, and they're beholden to, shareholders and the board of directors, and all this stuff about building relationships is touchy-feely. What would you say to them?
I got a hard answer. It is not soft stuff. It's the hard stuff. It really
Mm,
does matter. I mean, the work on the trust equation is just the tip of the surface. The soft skills matter more than the quote hard skills. And I would point out to people who make those kinds of arguments, the myth that too many of us have bought into is that because Wall Street and executives often focus on the short term, and we have all these short term metrics, that therefore the way to get short term performance is act short term. No, the way to get short term performance is act long term. I mean, just think about it. There are better numbers if you consistently adhere to a strategy and a way of doing things as opposed to changing it all the time. And that's true in terms of corporate strategy. That's true in terms of pricing. That's true in terms of all kinds of things. If you're constantly changing, then it becomes very clear you're just in it for yourself. You're just trying to meet this month's quota. You're trying to meet the quarterly earnings. Da, 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 da. The better performance short term actually comes from acting long term. And to bring it up to the ROI thing, that means the best ROI does not come from seeking highest ROI quarterly or project by project. Where it really comes from is saying, you know what, metrics like ROI, they're intended to be reflections, indicators, metrics, and take a map. A map is a metric, an indicator of a geographic reality. No map is as good as thorough, as detailed as the real thing,
mm,
unless you built a globally sized map.
mhm.
And therefore any representation, which is a shorthand, a stand-in for greater reality, it's going to have leaky points in it. It's going to be off. And salespeople, for example, are well known for finding the weakness. They'll optimize for the numbers, even if it means screwing over customers. Well, blame the person not who built the metric, but the person who said we're going to manage by the metrics. No, let the metrics be an indicator, an outcome, a byproduct. It's a rear view mirror indicator. Are we still on the right path? Yeah, we're doing okay. Once you start making the metric the goal, the God, the purpose, you're screwed. The purpose has to be doing the right thing for the customer or the other person. And if you do that, the ROI will work out pretty good most of the time. And in the long run, almost all the time. So it's kind of, I think of it as a goal confusion. The goal is not ROI. That's just a byproduct metric. The goal is, deep customer, doing right by the customer or the other person. And it correlates pretty good with ROI. But you start making it the purpose, you're worshiping at the wrong altar, if that
Yeah.
makes some sense.
Yeah, and just to your comment about measurement and making the measurement the goal, like you
Yeah.
just need to look no further than Wells Fargo
Yeah, exactly.
and open up a number of fictitious accounts. And then the other piece from my own experience is what initiatives do the executives or anyone go back and look at 3 years later to see if we actually got the return on that investment?
Yeah.
You
Not
know,
probably not very often.
It's not very often. The truth is, it's like you talk about price as a objection or concern that customers throw out,
Yeah.
but is it really price?
Yeah, I love this thought because think about price. If a customer says, "Sorry, you guys are great. We'd love to. The price was just out of our control, a little too high." That is the most socially acceptable
Mm,
excuse. It means
mhm,
I couldn't do anything about it. It's the money.
mm,
And the seller also says that wasn't my fault. That's the company's price. It wasn't anything I did. Well, the truth is, it was something you did or failed to do, and the truth is that is why they didn't buy, not price. That's a socially acceptable excuse that lets everybody off the hook. Seller and buyer alike were happy to walk away. And say, it was price. What could I do? It's hardly ever. If you look at all the research done on buyer psychology and sales stuff, price is way down the list of actual reasons. It's we couldn't trust them, we didn't believe them. Somebody knew somebody. There was an in, a fix. There was something else going on. It's not price.
Yeah, and maybe on a final note, let me think about what you said earlier and maybe connecting some dots relative to the real world and business. In the sequencing you mentioned when it comes to the four components and credibility. So there needs to be a business case described to leadership to say, hey, this is why we should do this.
Yeah.
To say that we're going to get this amount of money back, 3x or 5x or whatever it is on the money we invest in this, I think that's the wrong framing entirely. What do you think?
I basically agree with you. I think it's necessary. You have to say stuff like that to get something approved. Yeah, we think this is going to be a 4x, return, a 5-year payback, an ROI of 27%. That's our best guess. Here's the paperwork. We'll put it in a footnote. Now, let's talk about how to make this really successful. What would it take to get this thing going for you guys so you maximize those numbers? And then you get into the real dialogue. What are you going to do? What are we going to do? How can we help? Da, 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 da. And I mean, people justify emotional decisions with rational data. Nobody says we went with XYZ company because we kind of like them. That's socially unacceptable. You don't say that to the board of directors. The board of directors, you say, well, the ROI was 27%. The payback is 5 years. Looked like a good deal. That's why we did it. No, that's not why you did it. You did it because you felt you could trust this deal. It was going to be a good deal. You can feel it in your bones. You can't wait to get started. But the language that we use is financial. But don't mistake it for the real.
Yeah, it's not why the middle-aged guy bought the red Corvette.
That's right. Exactly.
So,
right.
All right. Well, great conversation.
As always, thank you.
I love expanding the application of all your work, in particular the trust equation, but all your work to leaders who are struggling to make change happen.
Yeah.
And probably underestimate the importance. I know I was guilty of it. The importance of making change happen through influence and leaning too hard on things like credibility and reliability, and not enough on intimacy and self-orientation.
Yeah. Good. Well, I always enjoy feeling the boundaries of those two variables getting stretched into areas like leadership and so forth. So thank you for indulging me in that.
Thank you, Charlie. Have an awesome one. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Charlie once said, this isn't rocket science, but it's also not easy. I agree. My biggest takeaway from this conversation is that trust isn't something we establish with our credentials and then move past. It's built in the moments when someone pushes back. Do we defend our plan, or do we get curious? Do we listen only to the words or pay attention to what isn't being said? If Charlie's insights help you pause, maybe ask one more question, and then maybe leave your plan outside the room, I believe you'll be a more effective and trusted guide. And thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the Trusted Guide podcast. If this conversation resonated with you, you can find more episodes at empoweredcx.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're leading change without formal authority, you're not alone in that work. I'll see you next time.